Hello everyone, my name is Chris from the Commander Crew and welcome to From Pennies to Power. Here we break down decks that create a balanced build without breaking the bank. Over time I have found that a well-rounded budget for an entire deck is generally about $100. Through my current meta and the consistent growth towards competitive, players need to find that right budget. With $100 we can have a high enough cap with more options for the decks. Here on From Pennies to Power, we brew decks the casual player wants that gives them the competitive edge. My decks are built on value, not their price. As Commander becomes more popular, a single deck is consistently rising in price. My objective is to create a fun and inexpensive deck that is both strong and focused. Prices are calculated using TCG player optimization, and they exclude the basic lands, as they can be found at your local game store or simply from friends. The prices are set from the time of the recording and over time may change. Within this budget, I'm going to include the Commander, as the Commander can be a huge aspect of the entire deck. In these breakdowns, we will explain the win con, how to get there, and define your line of defense. Are you ready for the power? Now let's pinch some pennies and start brewing. On today's deck tech, we will be going over Torbran, Thane of Redfell. Torbran is 1 and 3 red for a 2/4 dwarf noble that reads, if a red source you control will deal damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, it deals that much damage plus 2 instead. My reason to build Torbran is to create constant chaos. There have been many times where a win condition can be quite difficult to achieve. I found that if I'm going to be going down, then I'm going to bring everyone down with me. The focus of this deck is to use more enchantments, creatures, and spells to get everyone's life to 0 as fast as possible. Many decks focus on a single player, one by one, but with Torbran, everyone will always be taking damage. If the ship is sinking, then everyone should go down with the boat. The primary win condition of the deck is to use creatures and enchantments to cause damage to our opponents just for playing the game. If someone were to play a spell, tap a land, or even play a land, they will take damage. Over time this is stacked with similar effects as Torbran to make each player reach 0 as soon as possible. Now you must be careful with this damage, because they also affect you, so you need to keep an eye out for your life. With Torbran and other similar effects, the others will lose life more quickly than you, so you can edge out above them in rank superior. We have spells such as Spell Shock, Pyrohemia, Zozu the Punisher, and Flame Rift that work together to create our opponent's life down to 0 nearly as fast as possible. This way we'll get together and we will win the game. Now let's figure out how we build the board state. We'll start with some rocks and ramps. Now red has a lot of difficulty getting to the point where it needs to be to play a lot of spells in a single turn, but there are a few cards that will edge us out. We have cards similar to Pyretic Ritual, Desperate Ritual, and Seething Song that can add a little bit of extra mana for a single turn that can really edge us out above the other person. This will definitely help in a single turn, whereas that little bit of extra mana can definitely pull us ahead. Additionally, we have Mana Geyser and Brightstone Ritual that can create an explosive turn, gaining a significant amount of mana in a single turn to play significantly tons of spells. Now we can't forget about Soul Ring. It's a great card, let's all be real. It adds 2 mana for 1 colorless, and you can play it on turn 1, and there's nothing better than a turn 1 Soul Ring. Additionally, we have Burnished Heart, that when you pay 3, you can crack it to get 2 basic lands. Iron Mirror, Mannequin, and Fire Diamond, which are all colorless spells that can tap for 1 additional mana. So this is kind of similar to like a Llanowar Elf, but in colorless to help out the red. Now if you want a little bit of extra mana, we have Hedron Archive that taps for 2, Mindstone that taps for 1 that gives a draw card in the future, Commander Sphere that taps for 1 of any color and can potentially draws a card, and lastly Wayfarer's Barbel that can potentially give us an additional mana for only 2 more cost. Now another thing that red has a lot of difficulty with is drawing. So here we're going to draw, dig, and double dip. Now what do you mean double dip? Well, first of all, we have Wild Guess, Tormenting Voice, Thrill of Possibility, and Faithless Looting. Now there's a little bit of a downside, you have to discard a card or 2, but there's a lot more upside when it comes to red, where you draw 2 additional cards. Now this can really edge out by getting rid of the cards we don't need and giving us the cards that we do need. Lastly, we also have Magus of the Wheel. Now you gotta be very careful with this card, as even your opponents are drawing a full hand of 7. Now be careful when you use this because you don't want to give that edge to your opponents. To round out the draw, we have Mind's Eye, which can give you upwards of tons of draw as long as you have the extra mana for it, and Skull Clamp, because we have got extra goblins coming, so you'll see. Now let's talk about that double dip. We have Reverberate, Double Cast, and Increasing Vengeance that even has Flashback to double up on those spells. Out of nowhere, you can go from going absolutely nothing to having a super explosive turn just by doubling up on one of your spells, or even one of your opponent's spells. Keep these in the back pocket because most of your opponents aren't going to expect you to copy someone's spell at any given moment. Someone tries to counter you, guess what? Counter them back. Someone wants to play a Psych Rift, copy it back. Nothing is better than having your opponent cast a full-on Psych Rift and you copy it right back to them. Now how do we set the line of defense? Well, we've got goblins. With the Goblin Gang, you'll create a strong line of defense that'll help protect your life total until the time is right. To start off, we have Krenko's Command that creates 2 1/1 goblins, Dragon Fodder that also creates 2 1/1 goblins, and Hordling Outburst that can create 3 1/1 goblins. These can definitely help out in a pinch. Additionally, we have Beetlebag Chief that can create 2 tokens, Siege Gang Command that can create 3 tokens, Mogwar Marshal that can create 2 tokens, and Goblin Instigator that can create a token on top of himself. With all these goblins in the way, it's going to be very difficult for our opponent to make any stance on the board. Those goblins can also give us a little bit of utility. Skirt Prospector, you can sacrifice a goblin and add red mana. Goblin Matron, you can search for that very specific goblin that you need. Goblin Chizaroon, sacrifice a goblin, regenerate target creature. That can definitely help out if someone wants to destroy Torbran. And lastly, to get a little bit of extra damage, really quick, we have Goblin Bushwhacker that can pump the entire team by 1 power, and Goblin Warchief that can make all your goblin spells cost 1 less and give all of them haste, getting that damage in faster than your opponent can even check. Now let's take a stroll through the Burning Enchanted Forest. Here we're going to have multiple enchantments that are stacked together to do so much damage our opponents aren't even going to know what to do anymore. We have War's Toll. Whenever an opponent taps a land for mana, they tap all the lands they control. And if a creature an opponent controls would attack, they attack with all of their creatures. Additionally, we have Mana Barbs and Burning Earth, where if an opponent were to tap a land for mana, they take 1 damage. And if a player were to tap a non-basic land for mana, they also take 1 damage. Now this is also going to affect you. When you stack it up with Torbran and other effects, they're taking a lot more damage than you are. Additionally, there's Sulfuric Vortex. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, they're taking 2 damage. And if a player were to gain life, they gain no life instead. There's Spell Shock. If a player casts a spell, they take 2 damage. And Pyrostatic Pillar. If they were to play a spell with Converter Mechanics 3 or less, they take 2 damage. So no matter what you do, you're taking that damage. Additionally, there's Aether Flash. Whenever a creature comes into play, it deals 2 damage to it. That way, if our opponents decide to play some creatures, they're automatically going to die when they come into play. We have Perforos, God of the Forge. So whenever we have a creature enter the battlefield, each opponent is going to take 2 damage. We have Pyrohemia. At the beginning of the end step, if there are no creatures in the battlefield, we must sacrifice it. But by paying 1 red mana, we can deal 1 damage to each creature and each player. There's Impact Tremors. For whenever a creature enters the battlefield under our control, we'll deal 1 damage to each opponent. And lastly, Battle Stream. For whenever a creature blocks, Battle Stream deals 1 damage to that creature's controller. So we can swing at that damage and get the damage go through, and if they want to block, they take even more damage. Now let's see what happens when there's a little bit of unexpected damage. We have Fanatic of Mogas, that when it enters the battlefield, it deals damage to each opponent equal to a devotion to red. Now this can do a significant amount of damage in 1 single swing, so watch out for this and keep an eye out on your devotion. There's Zozu the Punisher, where whenever a land enters the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to that land's controller. This puts a huge halt on all your opponents from playing anything at all. Lastly, there's Tunneling Geopede, that whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. Lands are going to come, why not add some more damage to it? We also have Harsh Mentor, where whenever an opponent activates an ability of an artifact, creature, or land, Harsh Mentor will do 2 damage to that player. Now this can add up to a lot of damage over time. There's also Thermal Alchemist, that for every single time you decide to tap it, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. And whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you get to untap them. So this can potentially add up to a lot of additional damage. Then to add a little redundancy, we have Emperor Maw Hellion, that it has trample, that does help, but if another red source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals that much damage plus 1 to that permanent or player instead. And there's also Jaya Venerated Fire Mage, where she is a planeswalker and can do 2 damage to any opponent for -2, but it also reads, if another red source you control would deal damage to a permanent or a player, it deals that much damage plus 1 to that permanent or player instead. Now, if you get these all together, Jaya, Embermaw, and Torbran together, you're doing an additional 4 damage every single turn. This adds up to a lot of damage. Lastly, to have a little redundancy, we have Ankh of Mishra. So whenever a land enters the battlefield, it's going to deal 2 damage to that land's controller. Puts a huge halt on any opponent playing any land whatsoever. Now let's go over some protection and the last little bit of power. We have Red Elemental Blast that can target a blue spell or even destroy a blue permanent. Chaos Warp that can get rid of a single target that's driving you through the wall. And Swiftfoot Boots, which can give Torbran Hexproof and Haste that can come in an absolute pinch. For that last pinch of power, we have Price of Progress, where it deals damage to each player equal to twice the number of non-basic lands that player controls. And we have almost none, and generally all of our opponents have ton. Chain Reaction, where it deals X damage to each creature, where X is the number of creatures in the battlefield. Flame Rift, dealing 4 damage to each player, and Steam Blast, dealing 2 damage to each creature and each player. Now, for some last-minute surprises of damage, we have Dwarven Driller, where when you tap it, destroy target land unless its controller has it deal 2 damage to him or her. Tibbo, Rakish Instigator, where your opponents can't gain life. Now this will come in huge in the late game. You can -2 to create a 1/1 Red Devil creature token, where when it dies, deal 1 damage to any target. Tolonia Summoner. It has Ascend, but whenever it attacks, you may pay X in a red, or if you do, you create X 1/1 elemental creature tokens that are tap and attacking. At the beginning of the next end step, exile those tokens unless you have the City's Blessing. And when you comes to red, you could have tons of extra mana in the late game where you're like, what do I do with this? And guess what? Surprise. Tons of damage. And then Daggercaster, where it enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to each opponent and 1 damage to each creature. With all the stacks, this can be a one-sided board wipe. Our mana base is pretty easy. For the non-basic lands, we have Remnant Ruins that can do 2 damage to each opponent in the late game. Field of Ruin that can destroy a very pesky land that's dealing with you. Forgotten Cave, which can draw you a card. Castle Embereth, which can pump the entire team by 1 power in the late little pinch. And Dwarven Mine, just so Torbran has a little bit of dwarf friends. The rest, those are all mountains. Basic mountains. Making the deck super easy to build. And that's Torbran, Thane of Redfell. At the time of this recording, the subtotal came to $91.32. That's for an entire commander deck. All my friends in my meta and all the competitive plays, they're like $300, $400, thousands of dollars for a deck. This deck is only $91.32. This is super easy to build, super quick to get together, and you can always add to it in the future. Torbran is a big shocker to all your opponents. You're playing mono red, so it's very difficult to target 1 player, let alone 3. Now when you have Torbran out, you can get all your opponents down to 0 life, all at the exact same time. Torbran's a lot stronger than one would think. Now if you have any other questions, leave a comment down below. Let me know how you think of the deck. Would you change it? Would you play this? Would you even build this? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget, like, subscribe, and thanks again. My name is Chris from the Commander Crew. You have a great day. Peace.